in class from Guidestone, Colorado. My name is Monica Pless. I'm the Farm to School Director here in Salida. And today we're going to really be talking about trying to get your garden ready for winter. And I know it's sort of mid-September here, but things can turn here really quickly like we saw last week. We got about 9 inches of snow just over a week ago. So there's a bunch of different things that you want to be thinking about as we are getting colder, and we're hoping to catch you guys before you have to do quite all of this. So the first thing I'll say is that if you do have a really early frost like we had this year, usually we have about 100 frost-free days, and this year we got a light frost on July 1st and then another, it went down about 24 on September 8th. So what you want to be thinking about is if there are crops that are doing well that you want to try and bring in, a couple things you can bring in ahead of time and they can ripen off the vine, even if they're not quite as good. So we did that with our tomatoes. We brought in about 400 pounds of green tomatoes, and so far we've had a little bit over 100 of those pounds ripen. So we still have big tubs of green tomatoes, and every week we're going through and sorting them. The same thing with our pumpkins. We left some of our pumpkins out in the field to see if they were really solid green all the way around. We thought maybe we'll see if they get a little bit more ripe out in the field. We brought a lot of them into the dome to try and cure them and try and let them get a lot of sun, so that's how they can ripen into a nice orange pumpkin that we can have for our pumpkin patch. When we are bringing in some of those storage items, so more like winter squash, delicata squash, butternut squash, pumpkins, those you want to cure in a fairly dry area at a good temperature. So I have done it everywhere from, like, you know, if the only place I've had that was pretty dry was a greenhouse, I've done it in that, and that's probably been a little on the warmer side for them. And then I've also done it in a barn if that was the only dry place I had, and that's probably been on the cooler side for them. But you want to get it sort of somewhere between 50 and probably 75 degrees is ideal. And that helps them dry out that outer rind. If you think about trying to cut into a butternut squash that you get from the store, it dries out that rind so that it keeps it really, it keeps that air circulation from like bringing in any kind of rot. So that's how you want to cure things like winter squash and pumpkins. If you want to cure something like sweet potatoes, you want to do it in a probably even hotter area, so 80 or 90 degrees for a week, and at really high humidity. I've definitely done those in a lot of greenhouses before, but again, if you don't have a greenhouse, you can keep them in your house, keep them in a plastic bag so it tries to hold some of that humidity in, and that will help them develop more of their starches into sugar and make them taste really good. We also try and pre-harvest things like onions and garlic, and we want to let them dry, hopefully not in direct sunlight, so that we let them develop that nice papery covering that helps to protect them. So we have onions and garlic through the winter. And then there's things like roots, like we do a lot of salad turnips and carrots and watermelon radishes. All of those, if you cut the tops off, put them in a bag and put them in your crisper drawer in your refrigerator. They want to stay really cool, like in the upper 30s, and they'll keep for months and months if you keep them well. There might be some things that you're hoping to like keep longer out in the field and hope that it makes longer. So last week we did something on low tunnels and about row cover. That will help make a big difference. You can also use those walls of water around your tomatoes, and it's basically a whole bunch of tubes of sort of cylinders of water that you pour water into, and then that helps, if anything, the water is going to freeze before the tomato that's in the center is going to freeze. You can also mulch things with straw. So if you're hoping to overwinter carrots or roots or something in the ground, giving it a lot of straw on top will make a big difference, because it will mean that that soil and that crop has a more consistent soil temperature. It won't go through as many frost, freeze, and thaw cycles. So that's also something that we do. If we plant our garlic in the fall, you plant an individual clove, and each clove will grow into a whole head. You want to give that lots and lots of compost. Garlic, it can be a pretty heavy feeder, and then mulch it heavily with straw. So we have some extra straw around here that we like to mulch with. A couple other things we like to mulch are right behind me. So we grow some some more tender perennial herbs like rosemary and lavender, and they will usually make it through a winter here, but if you're not sure, putting a nice thick layer of straw on top of them helps to make sure that they'll make it and come back the next spring. And when I say a nice thick layer, I want to say that if I look down, I can't see the soil at all. I usually can stick my fingers all the way down and not see my fingers before they touch the ground in the straw. Along those lines, you want to try and add, get as much ready for the spring as you can, because spring can be a really busy time in a garden. And so if you have a little bit of nice weather in the fall, anything you can do to get your garden ready for the spring is going to make your life easier in the fall or in the spring. And so one of the things I like to do is I like to get a lot of good compost. We get our compost here from Elements Mountain Composting from Julie Mock. Spread a nice layer of compost on your beds. Go ahead and fork those beds, make them nice and loose. The more beds you can form now in the fall, that's something you don't have to do then in the spring when they might still be really wet with snow melt. And then the best thing you can do is also to add some tarps over it. The tarps will help to make sure that those beds don't get too waterlogged over the winter, and when you take those tarps off, they'll be really pre-warmed, especially if you put a tarp that has a black side and the black side is up. That'll pre-warm them in the spring so that the ground is ready to work in those beds earlier. I like to do that on whatever part of the farm is where I'm going to do the earliest spring planting. And then I also like to think about, on the farm we use a lot of irrigation. Usually in the spring we start before we can turn the irrigation on because it's too cold. There's too much chance that it would get frozen and it would break our pipes. So I like to try and plan an area where I want to plant my spring crops, that if I need to, I can reach with a hose and water by hand, or I can hook up a small sprinkler and make sure that I can water it with a hose that I'm willing to drain every day. Along those lines, before you get a really hard freeze, you also want to try and blow out your irrigation. You can get a landscaping company to do this for you. If you have more drip irrigation, what they do is they're going to hook up an air compressor to it, and it basically just uses air to blow out all the water in it. If you just have hoses, you can just sort of take a hose and lift it as you're moving along to make sure that you've drained all the water out of the hose. And definitely if you have sort of a small scale irrigation timer that just hooks up to a hose, make sure you take that off before it gets frozen, because that irrigation timer will last a lot longer if it has all its components not get water frozen in it in the winter. Another thing to think about in the winter is if you have some small engines. If you have a rototiller, if you have a chainsaw, if you have a weed whacker or a mower, you want to make sure if they're not going to be kept in if there's any chance they're going to get really cold, and especially go through hot and cold cycles, like in a separate garage or in a shed, you want to put gas stabilizer in it. You can get it at a gas station or at a hardware store and ask for gas stabilizer to make sure that it doesn't gunk up your engine. And then one thing that is really helpful, and I wish I had done last year before the snow flew, is to make sure that if there was make sure I have really good notes of where I planted everything this year. I always do a crop plan, so I have a plan of where I'm going to plant things. It doesn't always go exactly according to plan. So before the snow falls, I want to write down exactly where I planted everything, so I know that. Both if I want to go out and get something else that maybe is going to make it through the snow, like a root, like I want to go dig potatoes or dig carrots, which you could do through the snow if you had to. It's not the most fun, but it's possible. Make sure you mark that. But also so that as you're planning for next year, you know, okay, I put tomatoes in this bed, so if I want to do a crop rotation, I want to put something that's in a different crop family than tomatoes in that bed next year. So maybe I'll try broccoli there, or maybe I'll try putting my carrots there next year. The winter is a great time also to start doing your crop plan for next year. So take notes of what worked well this year. If you weighed crops as they came in, you can calculate your yields and say, figure out that, you know what, we got much more production of cherry tomatoes from Sun Gold tomatoes last year than we did from the Super Sweet 100. So we planted more Sun Gold tomatoes this year. Plus, I also like them better. So making notes about what you liked, what worked well, maybe what didn't work well, and where it was this year. So if you want to try it again in another location, you can try and see if you have another spot in your garden that it might do better in. Or you can see if there are places that you are not getting great yields from, if you want to make sure to add extra compost there, and really work that soil and make sure that it's like as healthy as it can be for the next year. One other thing, as you're planting your crops for next year, is to inventory your seeds, and then also see if there's any seeds that you want to be saving from this year. We did a whole another series about seed saving, but just I'll point out that, you know, one thing we're doing this year is saving some seeds from carrots. Carrots are a biennial, which means we have to wait 2 years to save the seeds, but we grow a lot of them. So this is a great time to make sure that we have some carrot seeds. Anything else we want to save, maybe like some dill seed is really easy. Some lettuce, if there was a lettuce that you'd accidentally let go to seed, this is a good time to save that, label that, and also make those notes about which varieties you'd like to order for next year. If you are starting some of your own transplants, the fall, when it's still a little bit warm, is a great time to clean out your transplant trays for next year. You want to hose them out, make sure you get all of the remaining material out, whether it's soil or anything like that. And then you also want to sanitize them with, I either use a very light bleach solution or a very light hydrogen peroxide solution, because you really don't want to get soil-borne diseases into your plant starts for next year. So that's a really good thing to do. And you can also then inventory things like your trays, or did you break a lot of your trowels? This is totally the time to make the notes about that, even if you aren't ready to buy the seeds and the supplies and the tools yet. This is a good time to make note of what you still need to get to make sure that your garden is really ready for next year. Of course, you know, with the low tunnels that we talked about last week, we hope that you have some ideas for trying to extend the season, whether it's through mulching, whether it's through bringing things in and hardening them off, maybe bringing in pots of a couple you know, herbs like basil, or your one special extra delicious tomato plant, and bring it inside and get another couple weeks off of it. We also just want to make sure that you have the tools to get all ready to set up for having a productive winter and really hit the ground running when we come back to next spring. Over the winter, we're going to do another high altitude garden class that we haven't scheduled yet, that will be about crop planning and how we know how much we want to grow of different things. And we'll also do one in the spring, again, reminding you how to make your own germination chamber, so that if you do want to start some of your own starts, you can do that. If you are here in the Salida area or Chaffee County, we hope that you come to our pumpkin patch. It's going to be coming up in October 9th through 11th and 16th through 18th. So watch our website, guidestonecolorado.org, for more details on that. We're always looking for volunteers to help make that experience really special, and it's a big fundraiser for Guidestone and a really fun event in the community. As always, if you found these garden classes helpful, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook. Join our newsletter list at guidestonecolorado.org. And if you're able and want to support us, we gladly accept donations as well. Thanks so much, y'all, and hope you have a great winter season.